Seraphina Hayes sat on a cold park bench, staring at the horizon as the sky turned shades of orange and pink. The world moved around her, but she felt frozen in time. A soft cry echoed beside her, and she turned to see her newborn baby wrapped in a thin blanket. She gently rocked the child in her arms, whispering soothing words, but her heart was heavy. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. She had once dreamed of a future filled with love and happiness, but now she was alone, abandoned by the one person she had trusted the most. A year ago, life had been different. She was a high school senior with big dreams, full of hope and ambition. She had always been one of the brightest students, balancing schoolwork with her passion for writing. She loved storytelling and had planned to become a journalist one day. And then there was Cassian Monroe, the boy she had fallen in love with so deeply that she had ignored every warning sign. He was the school's golden boy, the football team's star player, and every girl's dream. But he had chosen her, and that had made her feel special, as if she was living in a fairy tale. Their love story had seemed perfect. Late-night phone calls, secret notes passed in class, and promises whispered under the stars. Cassian had always told her that they were meant to be together forever. He had painted a beautiful future for them, talking about leaving their small town and starting a new life together. Sarah had believed him. She had trusted his words more than anything else. Even when he sometimes pulled away or acted distant, she had convinced herself that it was just his way of dealing with stress. Then, everything changed. It started with the little things: constant nausea, dizziness, and unusual exhaustion. At first, she'd ignored it, blaming school pressure and sleepless nights. But deep down, a fear had started to grow inside her. One evening, when she was alone in her room, she took a pregnancy test. She had held her breath as she waited, staring at the small stick in her hands. When the 2 pink lines appeared, her world shattered. Sarah had sat there for hours, her mind racing. How would Cassian react? Would he be scared, just like she was? Or would he hold her and tell her that everything would be okay? She had told herself that he loved her and that he would stand by her side. With that thought, she had wiped her tears and made up her mind. She had to tell him. The next day, she had found him after football practice. He had been surrounded by his teammates, laughing and joking as if life was perfect. Her hands had been cold as she reached out and touched his arm. "Cass, I need to talk to you," she had said, her voice barely above a whisper. He had sighed, but followed her to a quieter corner of the school. She had taken a deep breath, looking into his blue eyes, the same eyes she had once thought held love for her. "I'm pregnant," she had said, her voice shaking. For a moment, he had simply stared at her, his face unreadable. Then he had let out a sharp laugh. "That's not funny, Sarah," he had said, shaking his head. Her stomach had twisted. "I'm not joking," she'd whispered. His expression had changed in an instant, his amusement replaced by something colder, something she had never seen before. "No," he had muttered, stepping back. "That's not possible. You probably messed up the test." Tears had burned her eyes. "Cass, I took 3 tests. They all said the same thing. I'm having your baby." Instead of the concern or love she'd hoped for, his face had twisted with anger. "This isn't my problem, Sarah," he had said, his voice sharp like a blade. "I have a future, a football scholarship. Do you think I'm going to throw that away for this?" His words had felt like a slap. She had reached for him, desperate to make him understand. "Cass, please." But he had already taken another step back. "You're on your own," he had said, his voice final. Then, without another word, he had turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, shattered and alone. Sarah had watched him go, her hands trembling. The boy who had once promised her the world had just abandoned her when she needed him the most. But what she didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning. The worst betrayal was still to come. The days that followed felt like a blur. Seraphina walked through the school hallways as if she were invisible, yet she could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes on her. Whispers followed her wherever she went, soft enough that she couldn't catch the words, but loud enough that she knew they were about her. Cassian had been fast. He had spun the story before she could even process what had happened. The first time she heard the rumour, it hit her like a punch to the stomach. She cheated on him, someone muttered behind her in the cafeteria. That's why he dumped her. No way, another voice responded. Cassian said she tried to trap him, that she got pregnant on purpose so he wouldn't leave. Sarah's grip tightened around her tray, her knuckles turning white. She turned, ready to scream, to deny it all. But as soon as she met their eyes, they just smirked and looked away, as if she wasn't even worth listening to. She searched for Lila, her best friend, the one person she could still trust. She spotted her at their usual table laughing with a group of girls. Relief flooded Sarah's chest as she rushed forward. Lila, please tell me you don't believe... Lila turned slowly, her expression unreadable. Cass told me everything, Sarah, she said, her voice softer than usual, almost pitying. You should have been honest with him. Sarah's breath caught. Honest? Lila, I didn't... Lila sighed, shaking her head. I don't know what to believe anymore. The betrayal stung worse than the rumours. Lila wasn't just any friend. She had been her sister in all but blood, the one who knew her deepest secrets. And now she was standing on Cassian's side. By lunchtime, it wasn't just whispers anymore. Someone had written SLT on her locker in black marker. Her inbox was flooded with cruel messages. Desperate. Gold digger. Hope the baby isn't as pathetic as you. She deleted them without reading further. That night, she sat on her bed, hugging her knees, staring at the ceiling. Her parents hadn't noticed anything yet, but it was only a matter of time. Her mother had always been strict, obsessed with reputation. Her father wasn't much better. When they found out, it wouldn't just be yelling, it would be worse. A soft vibration from her phone pulled her out of her thoughts. A message from Cassian. Cassian, we need to talk. Meet me behind the bleachers after school tomorrow. Her fingers trembled over the keyboard. She knew she should ignore him. She knew he didn't deserve another chance. But against all reason, hope flickered inside her. Maybe he had realized he was wrong. Maybe he was scared, just like she was. Maybe he still loved her. Sarah took a shaky breath and typed back, Okay. The next day, Seraphina felt her heart pounding in her chest as she made her way toward the empty field behind the school bleachers. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the grass, and the distant chatter of students heading home slowly faded as she walked further. Cassian was already there, leaning against a metal post, his arms crossed over his chest. He looked the same as always, confident, untouchable. But there was something different in his eyes, something she couldn't quite place. She took a deep breath, ignoring the sick feeling in her stomach. You said you wanted to talk. He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. Yeah, I did, because you're ruining my life, Sarah. Her chest tightened. Ruining your life? She repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. He pushed off the post and took a step closer. Do you have any idea what you've done? The coaches are questioning me now. My scholarship, my future. It's all on the line because of you. His voice was sharp, laced with irritation. Sarah's hands trembled, but she clenched them into fists. I didn't do this alone, Cassian. You were there too. His jaw tightened. Yeah, well, I'm not the one walking around with proof. The words stung like a slap, but before she could respond, he pulled something from his pocket and held it out to her. A thick stack of cash, wrapped in a rubber band. Her stomach turned. "What is this?" "Take it," he said, shoving it toward her. "Get rid of the problem. Fix this before it's too late." For a moment she couldn't breathe. The world blurred around her, and all she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She looked up at him, searching for any trace of the boy she had once loved, the one who had held her hand during thunderstorms, who had whispered forever in her ear. But that boy wasn't there. In his place was a stranger, one who wanted to erase her like she was nothing. Tears burned at the edges of her vision, but she refused to let them fall. She took a step back. "I'm not doing this," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And I'm not taking your money." Cassian's expression darkened. "Don't be stupid, Sarah. This is your way out. Take it and disappear." She shook her head, her entire body trembling. "No." For the first time, panic flashed in his eyes. "Sarah, if you keep this baby, I'm done. You'll be ruining my future, and I swear I'll make sure you regret it." A shiver ran down her spine, but she forced herself to stand tall. "You already made sure of that." She turned and walked away, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. Behind her, Cassian muttered a curse under his breath, but he didn't follow. As she stepped back onto the school grounds, she knew one thing for sure. Cassian Monroe was capable of much worse than she had ever imagined, and he wasn't finished with her yet. The days that followed were a nightmare. Seraphina had thought the rumours were bad before, but after rejecting Cassian's money, things took a much darker turn. It was as if he had flipped a switch, deciding that if she wouldn't disappear willingly, he would destroy her in every way possible. It started small. Her teachers, who had always praised her for her work, suddenly looked at her with disappointment. Homework she was sure she had turned in mysteriously went missing. Then her locker was broken into, her notebooks ripped apart and left scattered across the hallway for everyone to see. She knew Cassian had something to do with it, but she had no proof. Then came the messages. Anonymous numbers texting her cruel things. "No college will take a girl like you. Hope you enjoy being a single mum. No one else will ever want you. Should have taken the money, idiot." She tried to ignore them, but it was impossible when even her own home wasn't safe. The night after she had refused Cassian's offer, her mother found out. Sarah had been sitting at the dinner table, barely touching her food, when her mother's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Is it true?" Her fork slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the plate. "What?" she asked, though she already knew. Her mother's hands trembled as she placed her phone on the table. The screen was open to a text, an anonymous message that read, "You should be ashamed of your daughter. Pregnant in high school. Looks like bad parenting." Sarah's breath hitched. She didn't have to ask who sent it. Her father was silent, his expression unreadable, but her mother's face was twisted with fury. "Tell me it's a lie," she demanded. Sarah couldn't. The moment she didn't answer, her mother's hand slammed against the table, making her flinch. "How could you be so reckless? Do you have any idea what this means for our family?" "I didn't plan this," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. Her mother let out a harsh laugh. "But you let it happen, and now look, everyone knows. Do you even care how this makes us look?" A lump formed in Sarah's throat. "Mum, please." "No," her mother snapped. "You're not bringing that disgrace into this house. You'll handle this one way or another." Sarah's stomach turned. "What do you mean?" Her mother crossed her arms, her expression cold. "Either you take care of it, or you leave. Those are your choices." Silence filled the room. She looked at her father, hoping for something, anything, but he wouldn't even meet her eyes. Sarah's hands curled into fists under the table, A deep, aching pain spread through her chest. She had lost Cassian. She had lost her friends. And now she was losing her family too. She had never felt more alone in her life. But as she sat there, her mother's cruel words ringing in her ears, she realized something. She wasn't going to let them decide for her. No matter what it took, she would survive. And she would make Cassian regret ever thinking he could break her. That night, Seraphina packed a small bag with shaky hands. Clothes, some cash she had saved, and her most precious belongings, all shoved into a worn-out backpack as silent tears streamed down her face. She had nowhere to go, no plan, only the unbearable truth that she couldn't stay here. Her mother's words still echoed in her head. Either you take care of it, or you leave. She had made her choice. The streets were quiet as she stepped outside, the cold air biting at her skin. She wrapped her arms around herself, her breath fogging in the night air. She had never felt so small, so lost. Her first instinct was to go to Lila. Maybe, just maybe, her best friend would understand now. But as she neared Lila's house, she stopped. Through the window, she could see her sitting on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. Carefree, happy. Sarah swallowed hard. She didn't belong there anymore. With nowhere else to turn, she wandered the streets aimlessly. The city lights flickered above. Cars passed by without a second glance, and the world moved on as if nothing had changed. But for her, everything had. She found herself at the park, the place where she and Cassian used to meet late at night, sharing secrets and dreams about the future, back when she thought love meant forever. She sat on a cold bench, pulling her knees to her chest. She wasn't just scared. She was furious. Furious at Cassian for betraying her. Furious at Lila for believing him. Furious at her parents for turning their backs on her. Most of all, she was furious at herself for ever trusting any of them. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. For a second she thought, hoped, it was someone asking if she was okay. But when she looked at the screen, her blood ran cold. Unknown number. I warned you, Sarah. You should have taken the money. Her hands shook as she read it again. Cassian. It had to be. Before she could even process what it meant, another message popped up. Unknown number. Now you'll see what happens when you cross me. A chill ran down her spine. She looked around, suddenly feeling exposed, vulnerable. Was he watching her? Was this another cruel game? Panic set in. She needed to leave. Now, she stood quickly, clutching her bag, and started walking fast. Her heart pounded with every step. The streets felt too empty. The shadows felt too long. Every sound made her jump. Then, a car engine roared to life behind her. She turned just in time to see the blinding headlights speeding toward her. Seraphina's breath caught in her throat as the car surged forward, its headlights cutting through the darkness like knives. For a split second, she was frozen, trapped in the glare, her mind racing but her body refusing to move. Then, instinct took over. She dove to the side just as the vehicle sped past, missing her by mere inches. The rush of wind sent her bag tumbling across the pavement, and she hit the ground hard, scraping her hands and knees. Pain shot through her body, but fear drowned it out. The car didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. It just disappeared into the night, leaving nothing behind but the heavy scent of burning rubber and the pounding of her heart in her ears. For a long moment, she lay there, gasping for breath, trying to piece together what had just happened. But deep down, she already knew. This wasn't an accident. Her phone buzzed again, the sound making her flinch. With shaky fingers, she grabbed it from her pocket and glanced at the screen. Unknown. Number. Next time, I won't miss. Her stomach twisted. Cassian, it had to be him. Who else would go this far? Who else had the money, the arrogance, the cruelty? Tears burned at the edges of her vision, but she refused to let them fall. He wanted her scared. He wanted her helpless. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Ignoring the sting in her scraped palms, she pushed herself up and grabbed her bag. She had nowhere to go, but she knew one thing. Staying on the streets wasn't an option. Cassian was willing to do whatever it took to make her disappear, and if she wasn't careful, he would succeed. Sarah wiped her face with the sleeve of her jacket, forcing herself to think. There had to be someone who would believe her, someone who wouldn't turn her away. Then, a name surfaced in her mind, one she hadn't thought of in years. Rowan. She hesitated. It had been so long since she had last spoken to him, since she'd walked away from their friendship because she was too caught up in Cassian's world. Would he even care? She didn't have a choice. With one last glance down the empty street, she tightened her grip on her bag and started walking. She just hoped she wasn't already too late. Seraphina's hands trembled as she stood outside Rowan's door. The house was the same as she remembered, modest with a porch light that flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the front steps. She hesitated before knocking, her mind racing with doubts. What if he turned her away? What if he had heard the rumours and believed them just like everyone else? Before she could talk herself out of it, the door swung open. Rowan stood there, his sharp green eyes widening in surprise. He had changed in the years since she had last spoken to him. His dark hair was longer, his frame leaner, but his expression was exactly as she remembered. "Sarah?" His voice was laced with disbelief, but not cold, not unkind. Her throat tightened. She wanted to be strong, to say something clever, something that made her seem like she had everything under control. But the moment she opened her mouth, a sob broke free. Rowan didn't hesitate. Before she could collapse, he stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. She hadn't realized how much she needed that until now. For a moment, she just let herself be held, the weight of the past few weeks crashing down all at once. Cassian, the rumours, her parents, the near accident, every moment of fear and betrayal washed over her. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't alone. Rowan pulled back slightly, his hands gripping her shoulders as he searched her face. "What happened to you?" His voice was quiet but firm, steady in a way that made her want to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could still be saved. She took a shaky breath. I don't know where to start." "Then come inside," he said without hesitation, stepping aside to let her in. The warmth of his house wrapped around her like a blanket, the scent of coffee and something faintly sweet lingering in the air. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, unsure of what to do, what to say. Rowan grabbed a hoodie from the back of a chair and draped it over her shoulders. "You're freezing," he muttered, his brow still furrowed in concern. "When was the last time you ate?" She shook her head. "That doesn't matter right now." Rowan exhaled, running a hand through his hair before sitting on the couch and gesturing for her to do the same. "Okay, Sarah, tell me everything." And she did. The words spilled out in a rush. Cassian, the pregnancy, the betrayal, the threats. How her parents had turned their backs on her. How she had nowhere to go. How she had almost died tonight. Rowan listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finally finished, her voice was hoarse, her hands gripping the sleeves of his hoodie like they were the only thing keeping her together. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze dark with something she couldn't quite name. "He tried to kill you," Rowan said slowly, his voice laced with barely restrained anger. She swallowed hard. I don't know for sure. Yes, you do. His jaw clenched, and he's not going to stop. Sarah shivered, not from the cold, but from the terrifying truth of his words. Rowan sat up straighter, his expression turning resolute. You're staying here, at least for now. Her eyes widened. I don't want to drag you into this. You think I care about that? He shook his head. You were my best friend, Sarah. You think I'm just going to let you face this alone? The sincerity in his voice cracked something inside her. For so long she had felt like she had no one left. But now, for the first time in weeks, she felt the smallest spark of hope. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay. Rowan's expression softened, but the fire in his eyes remained good, because Cassian just made the biggest mistake of his life. The next morning, Seraphina woke up to the unfamiliar comfort of a warm bed. Rowan's room was simple: dark wooden furniture, shelves stacked with books, a desk cluttered with papers. The scent of coffee drifted in from the kitchen, stirring her from the haze of exhaustion. For a brief moment, she let herself pretend everything was normal, that she wasn't running from Cassian, that her parents hadn't abandoned her, that she wasn't carrying a child in a world that wanted to erase her. But reality crashed back in when she saw her phone on the nightstand. Hesitantly, she reached for it, her heart pounding as she unlocked the screen. Dozens of missed calls from her mother. A string of messages from unknown numbers, each one colder, more vicious than the last. You really think hiding will fix this? Everyone's laughing at you. You should have listened. You ruined Cassian's life. He won't forgive you for that. Her fingers tightened around the device, nausea twisting in her stomach. They wanted to break her. They wanted her to disappear. Not happening. A knock at the door made her jump. You awake? Rowan's voice was quiet but firm. She took a shaky breath. Yeah. The door creaked open, and he leaned against the frame, arms crossed. He looked like he hadn't slept much either. Breakfast is ready. You should eat. She nodded, following him into the kitchen, where he handed her a plate of eggs and toast. It was the most normal thing anyone had done for her in weeks, but normal didn't last. Rowan sat across from her, his expression unreadable. I need you to be honest with me, Sarah. She swallowed a bite of food, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I have been. He exhaled sharply. Then tell me what you want to do. About everything. She hesitated. No one had asked her that before. Everyone had told her what she should do, what she had to do. But what did she want? I don't know, she admitted. I just know I can't go back. Rowan nodded as if he already expected that answer. Then, we make sure you don't have to. Her brow furrowed. What do you mean? I mean, Cassian thinks he's untouchable. He's spent years getting away with everything. But not this time. Rowan's voice darkened, his green eyes burning with quiet fury. He tried to destroy you, Sarah. He nearly killed you. We're not letting him win. A shiver ran down her spine. Rowan, he's powerful. His family. I don't care. His voice was steady. I know people who can help, but we need proof. She stared at him, doubt warring with something dangerously close to hope. Could they actually do this? Could they actually fight back? Rowan leaned forward, his gaze locked onto hers. Are you ready to make him pay? Sarah's pulse pounded in her ears. Fear still lingered, but beneath it something else began to rise. Determination. She nodded slowly, gripping her fork like a weapon. Yes, Rowan smirked, the first real smile she'd seen from him in years. Good, because Cassian Monroe's perfect little life is about to fall apart. The plan began that same afternoon. Rowan's contacts weren't just ordinary people. They were the kind who knew how to dig up dirt, people who had seen men like Cassian before. Powerful, privileged, untouchable, until someone pulled the right thread. Seraphina sat on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, while Rowan paced the room, his phone pressed to his ear. She listened as he spoke in hushed but urgent tones. "She's not safe as long as he's walking free. No, this isn't just about revenge. He tried to kill her. Right. Find anything you can." When he hung up, he turned to her, his expression set with determination. "It starts with evidence," he said. "You have to tell me everything Cassian's done, every threat, every lie, anything that can bring him down." Sarah exhaled shakily, her fingers tightening around the fabric of Rowan's hoodie that she was still wearing. "There's so much," she murmured. "Then we start at the beginning," he said, grabbing a notepad. "When did he first change?" She swallowed hard, thinking back. It wasn't all at once. It was little things at first. The way he would get irritated if I talked to other guys. The way he started deciding what I wore, what I said, where I went. Rowan's jaw clenched, but he didn't interrupt. Then, when I told him I was pregnant, Her voice broke. She forced herself to continue. He didn't just get mad. He laughed, like I was some stupid girl who thought he would actually take responsibility. Rowan scribbled notes, his face dark with fury. And after that, he started the rumours, made it seem like I was the one who cheated, said I was trying to trap him, and when people started believing him, he made sure I had no one left. Lila, my parents, everyone. She hesitated, then admitted. And then, the money. Rowan looked up. What money? She bit her lip. His family offered me a deal. If I left town and never came back, they'd make it all disappear. No one would ever have to know. And you said no? Rowan guessed. She nodded. And that's when things got worse. The messages, the threats. Last night. Rowan tapped his pen against the notepad, his mind already working through the possibilities. Cassian made one mistake, he said. He underestimated you. He thought you'd break. Seraphina wasn't sure if she'd already broken, or if she was just beginning to piece herself back together. But she knew one thing. She wasn't going to let Cassian win. Rowan's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. Looks like we've got something. She sat up straighter. What? Rowan turned the screen toward her. It was an email, one with an attachment. Cassian Monroe has secrets, Rowan said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. And we just found one that might destroy him. Seraphina's hands trembled as she took the phone from Rowan, her eyes scanning the email. The subject line alone made her heart pound. Confidential files. Cassian Monroe. Her fingers hovered over the attachment. What is this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rowan leaned in, his expression serious. It's proof. One of my contacts found something buried deep, something Cassian's family doesn't want the world to see. She hesitated for only a moment before tapping the file. A series of images loaded first, screenshots of emails, transaction records, and photos of Cassian at places he had no reason to be. But the real shock came when she scrolled further. There it was, a scanned legal document with the Monroe family name stamped at the top. She read the words carefully, disbelief washing over her. A settlement agreement. A hush money settlement. Her breath caught. This is from another girl. Rowan nodded grimly. Her name's Amelia Carter. 2 years ago, Cassian did the same thing to her, except she didn't fight back. His family paid her off and she disappeared. No one ever talked about it. Seraphina clenched her jaw. He's done this before. And he'll do it again, Rowan said, unless we stop him. Anger burned in her chest, replacing the fear that had consumed her for so long. Cassian had ruined lives. He had nearly killed her. And now she had the proof to expose him for what he truly was. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. "We need more," she said, her voice steady. "We need something that can't be ignored. Something that will destroy him publicly so his family can't just sweep it under the rug." Rowan smirked. "I was hoping you'd say that." He grabbed his laptop, typing quickly. "If we can find Amelia, get her to talk, we have a real shot at blowing this open." Seraphina swallowed hard. She didn't know where Amelia was or if she'd even want to be found. But one thing was certain. She couldn't be the girl who ran anymore. She was going to take Cassian Monroe down. Thank you all for listening to this story with our channel. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe to motivate us to bring more interesting stories. Much love to all of you.